Hello everyone, I'm Mike Cahill. Welcome to the premiere broadcast of Hatfield Currents, a news magazine show produced by a handful of townsfolk who call themselves Hatfield TBD Productions. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a longtime resident, having lived with my family on North Street for 40 years. I'm a former selectman and a former school committee member, and I'm currently chair of the town's redevelopment authority. And at least for now, I will host Hatfield Currents. The show will feature an interview talk show format. Programming will explore topical issues facing the community. We'll introduce residents to town officials and local business leaders, and showcase community members who have interesting personal or town stories to share. The show's name is a bit of a parody. Like the never-ending currents of our two town rivers, integral issues, events, and personalities continue to flow into, through, and out of our community. This show is geared to keeping you informed of just some of them. New editions of the show will air every other Monday at 7 o'clock here on Channel 15. Each show will then be repeated across the following 2 weeks, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 7 p.m., unless preempted by a live community meeting. Initial pilot shows will be taped, and future editions may be aired live, giving viewers the opportunity to submit questions by phone or by email. Also, plans are for future shows to be available for download via the town's website and YouTube. Lastly, and most importantly, we will need to hear back from you. We need to know what you think. We need to know your suggestions, and we need to know how many of you are watching. We need your feedback in order to decide whether to continue the show once the pilot series is over. You can do this by emailing us at hatfieldcurrents@gmail.com. Again, that's hatfieldcurrents, that's plural, @gmail.com, or by calling me or any other member of the production team. And a simple yay or nay is fine. Our premiere show today will feature Jeff Boyle, current chair of the Hatfield Select Board. This program will showcase Jeff's personal background and experiences, and then we'll get into a discussion of the key issues facing the town and the Select Board. Future programs are planned to cover subjects as wide-ranging as the town hall renovations, town center visioning, we might even discuss the center school issue, Hatfield history, local business leaders and businesses, and interesting personalities in town. So without further ado, I want to welcome Jeff Boyle to the premiere of Hatfield Currents.
Thank you.
Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you.
So, Jeff, you are probably, given your role as the chair of the Board of Selectmen, you're probably the most visible personality on Channel 15 as far as local TV is concerned. And a lot of people know you and see you performing your role as the chair of the board, but not a lot of people know you as a person. And so we thought what we would do for at least a partial bit of the show is to kind of discuss that and find out a little bit more about Jeff Boyle and your background and your experiences as a prior to coming to the Board of Selectmen.
Sure.
So I know you and I go back a long way, but maybe you could share a little bit about your youth and the fact that you were raised here in
Sure.
Hatfield.
Well, first, I appreciate the opportunity to come. I think Oprah is safe, but having an opportunity to share and talk about issues facing the town is any way to increase the visibility into what we're doing and issues that we're facing and how we're approaching them. I think that's valuable. So I do appreciate the opportunity to represent the Board of Selectmen here. You asked about my personal background. Not particularly remarkable. Grew up here in town. My family had been here since, as a number of Irish immigrants since the 19th century. had a farm for many, many years. Attended local school. The old School Street School was my first grade. Second through eighth was in the center school, and then went off to Deerfield Academy. Attended the University of Massachusetts, was commissioned, stayed there one extra year doing some graduate work after I graduated in '66, and went on active duty with the Air Force in September of '67, remained on active duty until 1995, and then I went to work for the federal government as a civilian, working primarily in the intelligence community for another 13, 14 years. And I came home.
Came home.
Came home.
Interesting. Let's, before getting into your service career,
Sure.
which is certainly laudable, let's talk a little more about you as a youngster in Hatfield. Your dad and your uncle ran one of the 4, I think, Meyer Mendelsohn tobacco farms that were in existence back in the mid to late '60s, I guess.
Right.
It's where you and I probably crossed paths for the first time. Can you share any remembrances of, this is a farming community.
This is a farming community,
What kind
and
of roots are there,
the
Jeff
family had been involved in farming, as I say, since first members arrived. My grandfather with a farm involved with tobacco, involved with other families, the Mullins family with the old Hatfield Onion Storage Company, potatoes and other crops. I did, as you mentioned, work with my dad on the farm.
Right.
Initially began at a time when we raised the Havana outdoor tobacco, and then worked for a few years. And then at that point, my uncle and father, as you mentioned, hired themselves out in the equipment and barns and everything else to run a division of Myers and Mendelsohn. And of course, I was only about 11 or 12, so for the next couple of years I worked with other families. And then when I was 14, I was able to go back to work with my dad on the tobacco farm, and stayed there working summers ever since.
Right. So suffice it to say that this is an agricultural community, and there are definitely some agricultural roots and experiences in the guy that people see leading the Board of Selectmen in this community.
I have great respect for folks involved in that.
Yeah. Okay. You started to get into a little bit about service to the country.
Sure.
It certainly was extensive. The tenure was decades. Can you share some of the highlights, Jeff, of your military career?
As I say, I entered in '67, had a broad variety of assignments. Worked in an aircraft maintenance unit in Ohio. I worked in an intelligence unit in Vietnam, a missile wing in Kansas, for at an air base group, largest Air Force base at the time, Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. Served on the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Operations Directorate. Worked for a number of years with the Defense Mapping Agency. I served on the personal staff of Secretary Weinberger when he was Secretary of Defense. Did a variety of things. I think there were perhaps a couple of, I have to say, I enjoyed my time in the military. I really, truly did. It was some very capable and dedicated folks doing important work, often in harm's way, and I salute them all that are there today. But there are a couple of jobs that really stood out for me. As I say, I did learn in every job, but a couple of jobs. One with the organization, with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Operations Directorate. That activity was involved in any hiccup in the world, quite frankly. And it was an opportunity to see the interplay of the White House, the National Security Council, State Department, Department of Defense, NGOs, non-governmental organizations, work with our allies. It was an extraordinary learning experience. On a personal level, I think perhaps my favorite job was I was director of the Aerospace Center headquartered in St. Louis, Missouri. I was the director, had about 3,500 people in St. Louis, a couple hundred more in Wyoming, a handful in Washington, D.C., and it was at the time of the first Gulf conflict, and the folks, it was an air war. This was an activity in support of that, and folks did a terrific job, and I really enjoyed that. There were other jobs as well, but again, I truly enjoyed my time in the military and learned a lot.
And as far as geography was concerned, sounds like you moved around a lot.
Ohio once, Florida 2 different times, Alabama 2 different times, Missouri once, multiple times in and out of the Washington, D.C. area.
Washington, yeah.
Vietnam was my only overseas.
Yeah, yeah. So when did you marry?
Married, yes.
2 children, right?
2 children, and each have a boy and a girl, so 4 grandchildren.
4 grandchildren. Okay.
Son lives in Reisterstown, Maryland. My daughter lives in Oak Park, Illinois, just immediately west of Chicago.
All right. And when and where did you meet Laurie?
She worked on my dad's farm.
Laurie is Jeff's wife.
Yes, we met on the farm some years ago, and she was, I think, 15. I was
It was
maybe
the Meyer
16.
Mendelson hookup.
But you were talking about home, and I mentioned being home. You know, one thing we felt very important as Laurie and I were moving around is to give the kids a sense of home. Yeah. And for many years, up until essentially the middle of high school, the kids came back here to Hatfield, and Laurie is from East Hampton originally, and spent the summers with the grandparents. So we got to know their families, got a sense of home. Laurie in particular has a large extended family, close-knit, and came here, played baseball all summer and other things, and had a great time. But again, having a sense of place, sense of home
was important. Yeah. So after this extensive career of a military career and having moved around the country several different times and ending the military career, I guess, in Virginia.
Yes.
With 1 child with grandchildren in the Midwest and 1 child with grandchildren in the Mid-Atlantic states, why did you choose to retire to Hatfield after not having been here for 30 years or so?
Well, of course, after I left the Air Force, I did work as a civilian for the federal government, okay. Again, in the Washington, D.C. area. And I worked with organizations, 1 foot in the intelligence community, the other foot in the Department of Defense, largely involved with satellite imagery, with the Defense Mapping Agency, with what's called the Central Imagery Office, and then the National Imagery and Mapping Agency, now called the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. In fact, most of those other organizations I worked with, latter part of my military career, came into the new, what's now called the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, which is largely DoD and largely Central Intelligence Agency.
So you
personnel.
knew more about Hatfield from Virginia and Alexandria than some of the people in Hatfield knew about Hatfield because of.
So it was a good fit from carrying on from my military background. But with respect to Hatfield, we came back here because this was home. It had always been home, and again, we couldn't be with our daughter in Chicago or son in Reisterstown, so we came back here.
Chose them kind of a happy medium.
And after spending many years in the Washington, D.C. area, where traffic is absolutely terrible, coming home to a community with not a traffic light in the town, just terrific.
So you moved back to Hatfield, 3 years ago, 4 years ago now?
4 years ago.
4 years ago. You obviously come back to Hatfield, which you consider home, which is wonderful, with a very worldly view. Do you find that view any different from those of local residents? And, if so, does that present any kind of opportunities or challenges for you when you first came back?
I guess one of the things is having lived, particularly in the Washington, D.C. area, I lived in Fairfax County, Virginia. That's where my home was. To see the advantages of an effective county government. Coming back here, that's largely non-existent in Massachusetts. There are a handful of counties still functioning, but where the county handled all common services, whether it be water, sewer, fire, libraries, schools, ambulances, Department of Public Works, police, and more, assessing, all those ones. So you positioned schools, for example, in the proper place to satisfy a population, not necessarily geographic boundaries. So you positioned your fire departments to serve populations, not necessarily geographic boundaries. You avoided all those duplicative costs of infrastructure in terms of equipment. And one of the things, and I could go on that, but and when you come back here, we find we're now talking about regionalization, trying to recreate certain aspects of shared common services. That was one difference that kind of jumped out at me early on here.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly a huge difference, as you say, and I've experienced that in other parts of the country as well. The county versus the local operational structure for running a community.
Politically, we'll never get back to functioning counties, but there are opportunities using that model of shared service, regionalizing our activities to provide an opportunity to cut cost.
So you're retired, you're in Hatfield. We know one thing that you're doing, but what are the other things that are keeping you busy in retirement?
Well, actually, the Board of Selectmen is keeping me quite busy. I think people maybe have one impression and see a meeting now and then, but that's certainly not where the time is spent. Time is spent in preparation for the meetings. Like my other colleagues have other duties and responsibilities. I represent some 15 communities in Hampden and Hampshire County on the Metropolitan Planning Organization, doing transportation planning, participate in other regional groups on an advisory committee and some Interstate 91 activities, representing the community in legislative breakfasts and on and on and on. It takes quite a bit of time to do this job properly.
Is that one of the reasons why you ran for the board?
I think this is a continuation of what I've done all my life. I mean, I've been in public service, on the one hand, the military, and then working as a civilian for the federal government. This is simply a logical extension of what I've done virtually my entire working life.
Yeah.
And it was, I think, also an opportunity to pay back the community. I mean, I'll share there's kind of a little sense of obligation. I'm coming here, I feel confident I could do the job, had the time, I thought I should try to do the job, so.
Has your membership on the board been what you had expected early on?
That's a hard question to answer. as folks understand, the board is composed of 3 individuals. They're separately elected. Each bring their own training, experiences, worldviews to the table. And no one individual acts. I mean, it's what the Board of Selectmen do. Their decisions as a corporate board are the only things that count. People can have various views, but it's what the Board of Selectmen decide on. So I don't think I had perhaps a stereotypical view of what I was walking into. I've worked in large organizations, 16,000, 10,000, 4,000, and I've worked in small organizations, a couple hundred folks. So
Right.
Knowing this is simply another organizational group to work with where we need to exchange views, we need to work collaboratively, and we need to come to some cooperative and collaborative decision. So I had no preconceived notions one way or another.
Right. But I was just wondering whether you found the difference in, because of the difference in structure, public versus military, whether you found it more challenging because of the fact that you're, as with most even private organizations today, I mean, you usually are reporting to someone, and that someone has authority over you and other direct reports. And for the first time, or maybe it's not the first time, but this is one of those situations where a team of people are the leaders as opposed to one person being a leader.
Well, I think
find that?
I think there's a stereotypical view of military leadership and military management that's the result of B-level Hollywood movies, and people who have never served have a misunderstanding. But for example, certainly there are instances where there's command and control, a clear objective, clear lines of accountability and responsibility, people staying within their lanes, not a lot of debate. You just need to get things done, and there's certain kinds of crises environments where that's appropriate. But but leadership is leadership, and it's situational. I think each leader, whether you're in the military or in federal government or local government, you have a toolkit of various things you can pull from, depending on the particular situation. What's the nature of the issue? Who are the players? What are their interests? What are their skills? What are their abilities? How sensitive is this? How quickly must we act? So in many of the organizations in the military, for example, the ones largely that I was involved with, many of them were largely civilian organizations, not strictly military. So this business of building a team, that's critical to any military operation. It's critical to any civilian operation. It's critical to private industry. It's critical to local government. So there really is not any significant difference. I think, again, leadership is situational, and you pick out the proper tools you need to address a particular circumstance.
So the organization chart might look different on paper. The way of managing individuals.
Well, the organization chart may look differently, but like I was mentioning on the operation, the organization of Joint Chiefs of Staff. I mean, you're talking about collaboration with the State Department.
Absolutely.
You're talking about collaboration with foreign governments. You're talking about collaborations with the Hill. There are a bunch of players with varied interests, and you need to bring that group all together to move out on some common path.
Let's talk about the Board of Selectmen specifically. As chair, what do you see as the Board of Selectmen's vision for the community? And maybe you could talk about maybe some goals, and some strategies for achieving that vision.
Again, I want to come back. The Board of Selectmen is a corporate board.
Right.
I'm speaking here not on behalf of my colleagues, although I think I am properly representing them, but I want to acknowledge that perhaps not everything I'm going to talk about has been
Right.
voted
You
on
want to
per
qualify
se.
it a bit.
I'm sharing my personal opinion.
Yeah.
When I first came back and decided, well, I'll run for the Board of Selectmen, one of the things I thought about, well, what is my vision for the town? And what I came up with, and what I sent a little card around to folks about, was a community, a fiscally responsible community, creating its future while respecting its past. It really didn't take me very long to come up with that. And I look back on it occasionally, and I think I got it on the mark. We were sharing, we were creating some goals and objectives for our new town administrator, and I offered that up to my other colleagues on the board as a context for that discussion with the town administrator, and they agreed. Again, we didn't vote on it, so I'm offering that up as the vision that informally we've all kind of come to agree to. And I think it captures, to me anyway, the sense of the community. On the one hand, we're a small community. We need to pay attention to our finances. On the other, you mentioned historical roots. We care very much about the views, the kind of the sense of the town, the feel of the town, the agricultural nature of the town. We don't have a lot of large industry. It's just a unique feel. And then on top of that, though, we still have to pay attention to the future. I mean, we can let the future come and just happen and deal with that, or we can step out and try to create that future. So we have, along those lines, I think, taken a number of initiatives with respect to our financial well-being. I would say we have an excellent team working together as a team, not only just with the Board of Selectmen, but with the Board of Selectmen, working with the school committee, working with the town treasurer, the town clerk, the finance committee, and others, working very, very collaboratively on what we're doing. The Board of Selectmen have taken a number of actions. For example, these are background kinds of things that don't get a lot of play, and probably no one else but the accountant and myself and a couple others who care about, but we created a set of financial guidelines for the community. We've developed a property control policies. We've put in place an internal management control. We're working on an accounting policy. All this kind of background stuff that you'd expect to have been done a long time ago. But no one got to it. We've I think, refined and documented what our processes are for our capital budgeting activity. Make sure that complies with our town bylaw. We've done the same thing on the operating budget side. Within the past 2 weeks, we invited in, actually we did this over a year ago and they finally were able to come in. We invited the Department of Revenue Division of Local Services to come in and to conduct a financial management review of our community. Are we doing things right? And this is, we provided extensive background materials, interviewed all the usual suspects. One telling comment was when Sandy Belden, who's chair of the Finance Committee, and I, chair of the Board of Selectmen, both met with the team, and they went around individually meeting with the treasurer, the assessors, and so on. Their comment was, in many communities, the chair of the Board of Selectmen doesn't even speak to the chairman of the Finance Committee. So
Right.
it was kind of telling. So we've made a significant effort to get our financial act together. There are some other things. We talked about our goals. One of the things,
What's on the
creating
horizon?
creating our future. I think one of the things there is what we do, and this ties to kind of the key issues sitting on our plate today. Infrastructure is one key issue. Our schools is another key issue. And economic development is a third key issue, but part of this creating our future. As you well know, as chair of the HRA, the Hatfield Redevelopment Authority, the Board of Selectmen are really looking to, since we have no staff, using the HRA as our agent with respect to economic development. And I know that we've completed the study. We have some ongoing activity there. That's absolutely critical to our future because we're so single-threaded in terms of our base, tax base here in the community. We've got to expand that. Related to that, though, is this business of respecting our future, or respecting our past. We don't want to do that in a way that's going to destroy the kind of the agricultural, rural, New England touch and feel of the community. So it has to plan. In addition, we're doing some other things. You saw, we held a special town meeting solely for the purpose to help a local business get the zoning it needed to build a new facility.
Right.
So we're doing a number of things.
So Jeff, if you were looking out 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, what are the key issues right now for you guys? What are your challenges and how are you dealing with them?
I touch back to three of them. One, infrastructure, economic development, and schools. So we were just talking about economic development, and that's not just for this 12 months, it's for the 5 years. It's a continuing, because nothing's going to happen very quickly there.
Right. Talk to us about, can you get
infrastructure,
more specific
sure.
with infrastructure? What do you?
Absolutely. For many years, and we're not unique in this regard, in order to balance its budget, we've largely neglected some of the maintenance and infrastructure needs of the community.
Deferred a lot of.
We've deferred maintenance, and you can do that for a certain period of time and get away with it. There comes a time, however, where there's a day of reckoning. One of the things has to do with our water system. We've had on the shelf now over a $7.5 million project that's bringing a new line from the reservoir down here to the center of town. And there's lots of reasons why we need to get on with that. We've done a preliminary design on that, but we need to do the final design. One of the things that we've deferred are bringing bumper stickers. We know we need to do X, but taking it from the bumper sticker title level down to defining the project and spending the money on doing the proper design, so we have something to put on the table to go out to get grant support and community support. So we have a number of infrastructure projects in water. In addition, we have a number of infrastructure projects or other pending right here in the town center. One of the things we recently held was a visioning session, and I've been kicking myself that I should have done that. I should have initiated something like that 3 years ago when I first came on the board, to engage the community in looking at town center business, those zones. What is it we might do to revitalize this? We've got the School Street School, we've got the Center School, we've got the Town Hall. In terms of facilities, there are recreation and park needs that Board of Selectmen are the Parks Commissioners, along with 100 other things.
Right.
But we've really not addressed those kinds of needs for the community. We have an excellent open space plan where they've recommended some initiatives. Mm-hmm. Part of that could be satisfied with some things here in town center business. We've also got some other things going with the city of Northampton, attempting to link up their bike trail to Elm Street, initially Elm Court. In fact, Northampton has acquired a 50% interest in part of the land coming along the river from Damon Road up toward Hatfield, and they're working on the other 50%, and we're in dialogue with them and on the other kinds of arrangements related to that, where folks would pop out on Elm Court and then be able to continue on. So we've got a number of unmet infrastructure needs that critically must be addressed. And oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking that, because we've had as a community to defer, the reason we've had to defer these things is obviously because of one general, I guess, item, and that's resources. And within that, there's certainly the finances, the dollars to be able to address these issues. And you've kind of begun to address that a little bit with financial controls and perhaps financial accountability.
And economic development.
And economic development, trying to generate more income. But the other is you need to have good people that are overseeing and managing those resources, if you will. And let's talk a little bit about, very quickly, because we're beginning to run out of time, the management team at the town hall. There have been two reasonably new people that have joined you on the board. Phil Genovese is the DPW director, and Jeff Ritter as the town administrator. Can you talk a little bit about how things are going with them and their roles and relationship to the board, and how they're fitting in?
Start with the town administrator. A few months back, Ms. Marlene Mashansky moved on to another job in Braintree, and she certainly deserved the pay raises that went along with that. You're right. The finances do affect everything. It affects what we can pay people.
Right.
So but I think we were very, very lucky in terms of our hire of Mr. Jeff Ritter as our town administrator. We had over 50 applicants. There were several lawyers. There were a number of folks with their doctorate degrees that applied for that job. Really. And it became the challenge for the board, not one of quality, but one of fit. Who would best fit in this kind of, the chemistry, because there's an established working environment, contacts, scale, those kinds of things. And I think we made an excellent pick in Mr. Jeff Ritter, and he's up and running, and I think doing a fine job. Mr. Phil Genovese has done many things, but he was in Public Works in Westfield for a number of years. He brings a solid background in such work. I think one of the challenges he's had is living within the constraints of the budget. I mean, it's not as though he's not well aware of the many things that need to be done,
right.
But there are issues in terms of funding those projects. And secondly, over the years, the Department of Public Works has been reduced in terms of the number of staff, so the in-house capability, the organic capability, is perhaps less than it used to be too. So he's challenged. It's a matter of prioritization in getting things done, and I think he's doing a fine job.
Good. Anything else on that you'd like to bring up?
Well, I just want to close. I left off one other thing in terms of our challenges, and I mentioned economic development, infrastructure, and I mentioned schools. No, when I talk to the schools, I'm talking the Board of Selectmen in its hat as Chief Executive Officer of the town. Really, I recognize that the schools have their school committee, but the schools are a community resource, and in my mind, a community treasure. We have a very, very small school, the smallest school district in the state of Massachusetts. It represents a challenge for the town in terms of funding it and keeping it adequately funded. But, and I know there's been pressure earlier by the state until the economy went sour to push to regionalize to the extent we can possibly help the school. Certainly, I think it's a treasure for this town to retain. I think it's an inherent part of the fabric of its identity, its own independent school system. And that remains a challenge because as the economy improves, I think there'll be renewed pressure. So I'm sure they'll be looking at other things like shared services with other schools or shared positions, ways to cover the hurdle of the finances. And I think there'll be some hard questions for the town as to the commitment, the increased commitment required, because these facilities also need upgrading. There's infrastructure projects that have been delayed here, and we need to step up to those. My comment is I think those school systems are a gem here in town, and we need to work in a collaborative way with the school committee to help them.
And we're hoping that at some point we would have our new superintendent of schools, John Robert, come on Hatfield Currents, and we can have the same kind of dialogue that we're having today with Jeff. Jeff, I want to thank you very much. We're about out of time for our first installment of the show. I want to thank you very much for coming and joining me. It's been a very interesting and informative visit as far as I'm concerned, and I'm hoping that the people that are watching have found it informative and have enjoyed it as well. Thanks, Jeff, for being here.
Thanks.
Just a reminder for everyone, this same show will be rebroadcast Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays at 7 p.m. through November 12th, Friday, November 12th. Our second show will premiere Monday evening, November 15th at 7 p.m. here on Channel 15. Our guest for that show will be George Ashley. He's the current chair of the Hatfield Historical Commission. And we'll find out a little bit more about George as a person. He's lived in Hatfield for a long time. And then we're going to get into some of the things that he and the Historical Commission are working on, much the same as what we've just done with Jeff. So Jeff, I hope you've enjoyed the discussion and being on the show. And for all of you that are watching, until next time, we hope that you have a pleasant evening. I'm Mike Cahill, and watch yourself, Hatfield.
Thanks.